We're doing this podcast in regards about the 2025 federal election that is currently underway. In spite of the attacks that Canada is currently facing from United States President Donald Trump, and with the federal election underway, the Conservatives from the polls from the press with their predictions that the Conservative Party of Canada is narrowing the gap. But the concern that I had noticed with the federal election is the boundary changes. Some boundaries were changed. The Central Nova boundary is my boundary, and I have concerns with it. And I had spoken to Sean Fraser's office assistant before the federal election had begun a few months ago. And my concern with the boundary changes is the size of the boundary. Is there going to be two offices for the riding of Central Nova? Because my concern is this riding is going all the way out to Pictou County. That's what I feared. Is there going to be a second office for the riding of Central Nova? If not, who in the hell created this setup? That's a mighty bad. The person should be fired for coming up with that, for starters, because their concern is there. Well, see, I guess there's actually a question to this issue that I'm bringing up here. Is there going to be a toll-free number for the people of Central Nova riding if they choose to get a hold of their member of parliament, whoever that may be? Because the concern is, if people who live in Lake Echo, Porters Lake, East Chezzentcook, Musquodoboit Harbor, Jador, Lake Charlotte, Tangier, Sheet Harbor, are these people going to be forced to dial long distance to contact their member of parliament? Because if so, then this riding should be dissolved as soon as possible, and whoever came up with this idea should be fired from their jobs effective immediately. Because the concern is, we were with Daryl Sampson with the Sackville, Preston, Chezzentcook riding. So the federal government decided to come in, or Elections Canada, I should say, decided to come in and change up that boundary. The Sackville, Preston, Chezzentcook riding was always being redesigned, reconstructed over the years. Because I remember the days when Peter Stauffer was the member of parliament, when that riding would stretch out to Musquodoboit Harbor and beyond. They would always chop it up piece by piece as years gone by. And the concern is, even when Peter Stauffer was the member of parliament, at least Peter Stauffer addressed of having a toll-free number provided for the constituents for them to contact their member of parliament when they felt that they may need to reach out for services. And the question is I got for the Central Nova riding is there going to be a toll-free number provided, and is there going to be a second office for the constituents of Central Nova? Because if they have to reach their member of parliament, he should be in a realistic distance for constituents to access their member of parliament. Because if whoever the member of parliament may be, when this federal election ends, they should be within reasonable reach to access their member of parliament when they need to access that person. Because the concern is, if we have constituents that has to travel a lengthy distance, and most people are struggling to have cars, people struggle to find transportation if they don't have a car, because that Central Nova riding, majority of that riding does not have access to public transit. You have a shuttle service, but she's mighty costly to be using, and I would not be using that service, if you know what I mean, because you may be stuck with a hefty bill of $200-300 just for one way. So obviously, accessing your member of parliament, if he only has the one office, could be mighty costly. And that's something that's just unacceptable to be accepting. Now, the federal election is currently underway. Nominations had ended. The conservative candidate is Bryson Jenkins, who I just found out a couple minutes ago on the internet. The NDP candidate is, I can't ever pronounce his first name, Jemish McDonald. I can't pronounce that guy's name out. And the independent, and they had their PPC party, and Green Party and all this stuff. Now, here's a concern what I have with this federal election. How are we going to better ourselves? Because over the years, people have been voting for the better of their livelihoods. And the only thing that we've been seeing over the years was people going in office who've been posing a risk to people's very livelihoods. They've been, I felt Justin Trudeau did a good job, but his carbon tax was at a serious question mark by it, if you know what I mean. How's having a carbon tax cleaning the environment? That's the whole thing I question with Justin Trudeau. Raising money to create a tax is not cleaning the environment. If you want to impact the environment, you know what China does on certain days? They go by, was it license plate number, I was told? Certain people are allowed to drive on certain days. Some other people are allowed to drive on certain days. They take turns. But that's what I was told how China does their combat with the environment and all that stuff, with pollution, all this stuff. The key tool to combat the emissions, the pollution, the carbon monoxide is public transit. People have a right to access public transit. It shouldn't be a debate if they should have it in their community. It should be installed, either trains, bus, shuttle service, any means to get people to and from their destination if they may need to access some sort of public transit. Now, within the Central Nova riding, I believe that goes through Truro, New Glasgow, Pictou. They mentioned, I mentioned New Glasgow. All right. Now, those communities are quite populated. Now, I got a question for Sean Fraser, who's the current member. Well, actually, he's not the current member of Parliament because he resigned his office from when Justin Trudeau was the Prime Minister. So he's just a Liberal candidate. My question to the candidates is, why don't the town of Truro, New Glasgow, not have a public transit service within their communities? Why is there no public transit linking the communities of New Glasgow, Truro, and throughout the riding? It makes no sense not to have it. I mean, I was told that they tried it a few times and it didn't exactly pan out the way how they hoped it to be. But theoretically, think about this. If we're going to have a federal riding at this magnitude, at this size of a magnitude, it has to, their member of parliament office has to be within reach, reasonable reach to all their constituents. If that riding cannot accommodate a reasonable distance for their constituents to access their member of parliament, Elections Canada has to go back, redesign the riding, which I felt was poorly done. I believe they should have just left it as Preston, Sackville, Chezzentcook. They should have just left it the way it was. It makes no bloody sense. It really doesn't. It's mind-boggling here. Why is the communities of Jador, Musquodoboit Harbour, Gates Brook, Lake Echo, and Porters Lake involved in this Central Nova boundaries? It makes no bloody sense. It's beyond stupid. There's no word. I think this here is actually insult the word beyond a stupid, to tell you the truth. And the problem is, you know what's going to happen with this? This is what's going to happen. When the candidates get elected, whoever that is, they're going to hear the negative impact, the negative backlash from the community constituents once they're elected. This is not going to be a pleasant experience. It shouldn't be a pleasant experience because this is something that should have been thought of before it went into effect in the first place. And like I said, whoever the designers were with Elections Canada who decide to make this boundary change happen, they should be fired from their jobs. They should be chased out. I mean, if you got a hockey stick with a couple pucks, I'm telling you, take a couple slap shots at the designing committee of Elections Canada. You know, that's what they should be. They should be tied in a chair, put in the middle of the driveway, and have a couple people take a good couple crack slap shots at them with with a hockey puck. What's wrong with these people? This is something I'm very concerned about because before this went to effect, when I heard about it, I reached out to Sean Fraser's office. I left a voice message. Lucky me, they called me back. Nice lady, just talking to her. Very nice, lovely lady. Very respectful of my concerns. Trying to answer it the best way she can. And from what she told me, the boundaries was going to change. It's not going to be a great, big, massive district boundary riding with how we thought it would be. So I thought it was not so bad. All right. So when I look at the projections from CBC's website, it's everything what I feared. So now, that's why I got 2 questions for them. It's a yes or no question. Is there going to be a second constituency office for the riding of Central Nova? Yes or no? If not, why not? And can we have the pressure to have a second constituency office installed as soon as possible? The idealistic area for a second constituency office for Central Nova would be either through the communities of Porters Lake, East Chezzentcook, Musquodoboit Harbor, and that's where it should be. People from those communities, from Porters Lake, Lake Echo, Chezzentcook, Grand Desert, Musquodoboit Harbor, Jador, Lake Charlotte, Tangier, they should not be traveling 50,000 miles to attend their Member of Parliament's constituency office when they need to see their Member of Parliament. Last time when I seen the Member of Parliament's constituency office for that riding was located, it was in the community of New Glasgow. I believe it was at that shopping mall there, where right across the street from that hospital. What's it called? The Aberdeen Hospital? Is that what it's called? I haven't been out there in quite a while, but. And I'm saying, if that's their idea, you may want to friggin' look at this riding and chop it up and throw it back at us that it's not working. Because I'm telling you, if I get a bill, because I call my Member of Parliament for long distance numbers, I'm going to send the goddamn bill back at the Member of Parliament. Say, pay it, get out of my sight. I don't want to see this crap again, because this riding is too big. It's not even realistic. So now that puts me to the point, should I even be voting in the first place? The only candidate that I'm interested in is Sean Fraser. The rest, get him out. The only concern I had when the Sackville, Preston, Chezzentcook riding, when we were a part of that riding, was not the community, not the district, the riding, but the Member of Parliament himself, Daryl Sampson. He wasn't an idealistic Member of Parliament. I couldn't take him seriously. No matter how professional he tried, even though he's trying to be professional to the best of his abilities, but I just mentally could not accept him as a Member of Parliament. He just couldn't make that connection. Because when you go from Peter Stauffer, one of the all-time greatest Member of Parliament in the history of Canada, when you're going down to Daryl Sampson, that's a mighty big adjustment. And that was an adjustment that I could never adapt. And I remember confronting Daryl Sampson face to face. Daryl Sampson, one thing he knows about me, Adam Conrod don't hold back. He's quite up front. I never was one from backing down. I learned that from Peter Stauffer. Peter Stauffer said, Adam, you tell them what you think. You tell them. Don't hide it back. Tell them. And he said, don't make it sound like threatening or intimidating, anything that. Just tell them. Don't make it an ignorant format and anything. Just tell them. When they start to realize you're up front with your stuff, they're not going to dick you around, because that's what they try to do if they think they can sneak things around certain people. And all of those people that all knows it real quick. And, I just couldn't accept Daryl Sampson as a Member of Parliament. I just couldn't do it. And I remember going to Daryl Sampson. I said, I'm going to tell you something, Daryl. You did not beat Peter Stauffer in the 2015 federal election. I said, do you know who beat Peter Stauffer in the 2015 federal election? It wasn't Daryl Sampson. Oh, we all know that. It was Justin Trudeau. During that big wave, Justin Trudeau going around, sunnier ways, sunnier ways. The only people that seen the sunnier ways was the Liberals themselves. I was Justin Trudeau's former Liberal delegate. I don't regret backing him up to this very day. I still stand by it. Justin Trudeau was no different than any other Prime Minister of Canada. I can't say he was realistic, but look at all the scams that they had into effect. Justin Trudeau was caught in that wee scandal, which an event I never taken place in. I barely even watched television when it was being aired or broadcasted. Stephen Harper had all kinds of scams into place. So did Paul Martin. So did Brian Mulroney. So it's not okay for Justin Trudeau. So how's it different for Justin Trudeau? How's it the ultimate sacrilege for Justin Trudeau not to be entitled to a scam? Do you know what's wrong? There's no laws in place that hold these people accountable. That's what's wrong. You can have anybody as Prime Minister of Canada. You got to have rules in place for them to comply to, and when they violate it, you got to make sure that the rules hold them accountable. But they don't. That's what's wrong. What Canada has to do, they got to tighten their military. They got to increase their military. I stand by my comments I said in the past. Canada should have at least 2 aircraft carriers out there. They need to increase their military significantly. They can't be relying on other countries. That's what's wrong with Canada. We're relying on the United States of America to look after our own borders, our own national security. That shouldn't be. Canada's part of NATO, and here we are with a threat with the United States of America. Here's this concern I got with the United States of America and with Canada, how we currently sit. Let's just say the President of the United States, Donald Trump, says, screw it. We're going across the border. We're taking Canada by force. What does Canada have to ensure that the Americans are not crossing the borders by force, trying to take the country by force? They got nothing. They're part of NATO. Now the question to the Prime Minister is NATO ready to go, and is NATO big enough to defeat the United States of America? Because what's going to happen is what happened back in the heyday when Great Britain went to war with the United States. Donald Trump got this wrong when he stated Canada burnt the White House down during that big war. Great Britain burnt the White House, not Canada. Canada at the time was under the flag of Great Britain. And what's wrong with Canada is, and I agree with some of the stuff that President Trump's saying, Canada is too reliant on the United States of America. I have to agree to that. These are talking about this manufacturing jobs. What happened to Canada's manufacturing jobs? What happened to the manufacturing jobs here in Nova Scotia? Oh, that's right. We let it all go overseas. We had all kinds of that here in Nova Scotia at one point. But the Nova Scotia government and the government of Canada decided not to get involved on how to keep them here. In fact, we let it go overseas. That basically sums it up. And I got to say, we have to ensure that Canada can maintain its own sustainability, which I don't think it can. Canada should be making its own cars. It should be making its own clothing. It should be making everything, its own medications. Canada during the pandemic should not have been going overseas to come up with a vaccination for the COVID-19. That's one of the things I felt Justin Trudeau did a great job of combating. Not only did he make sure that Canada had the vaccine ready to go, but he also made sure that social distancing was in place. He made sure that all Canadians across Canada had access to a mask, so when they comply to the social distancing, if somebody's sick, they have some sort of protection when it comes to the coronavirus. So all you people that decide to look down and trash Justin Trudeau, I resent you guys on your actions. For you truckers, you convoys who went to Ottawa during the protests during the pandemic, you guys are an embarrassment to the national flag. You're an embarrassment to our country. You're an embarrassment to our national security. In fact, you are putting our national security at risk, and you are putting all Canadians at risk in so many ways. National security, preventing food from being delivered. You are doing everything humanly possible to put Canadians at risk, and it was unacceptable. Sean Fraser's decision to resign under Justin Trudeau's government. Now, I'm going to say this, I'm going to be upfront with it. I'm not going to comment on his decision because it's a decision where he felt he had to make. Because we all come to a point in life where we have to make a difficult decision, even though it may not be well received or famous or very popular. But everybody comes to a decision in life when they feel it's time. I don't want to be part of this situation. And really, when you're involved in a situation that you want to be part of, what's the best way how to get out of it? You leave. And that's what Sean Fraser had done. And when I look at Sean Fraser's background, he's young. Actually, he's younger than me, which I'm a little shocked when I seen this. He was a housing minister and all this stuff. See, what I like to see happen is I like to see every single Nova Scotian and Nova Scotia who's struggling to access housing, affordable housing. That's the key element that a lot of governments in Nova Scotia are failing to provide. Affordable housing, when in the past affordable housing was anything but affordable, when affordable housing should have been erased from that word affordable housing. All Nova Scotians should have access to affordable housing, safe affordable housing. How can we keep the wrong people from accessing affordable housing? Well, I'm going to tell you something. That there is quite straightforward. Laws got to change. People got to be more open-minded. People got to be more on their toes when you see the wrong people accessing these affordable housing units that pose a risk to you, to these people's families, and others around them. Laws got to change. Perhaps people with serious criminal offenses should not be eligible to access these affordable housing units. How do we better protect people if you have somebody with a mental health breakdown and decide to trash the apartment, they decide to set it afire, something right crazy? It happens. That's what we have to think of. How do we better finance this situation, this project, without having the Canadian taxpayers always on the hook? Sponsors, there's a way to look at it. Public donations from the community, there's a way. And there's a group called, what was it? Was it the National Habitat? The Habitat for Humanity. I was told they help people construct homes who are low income and all this stuff. Here's the thing. What if you have Canadians that live at home, that has a good sized property? Why can't the Canadian government construct these Canadians an affordable housing unit on their property so things are not so costly? That makes a lot more logical sense. It really does. But affordable housing is something that really needs to be zeroed in on. Now, with the national security, like I said, with President Donald Trump, Canadians got to be more acceptance of the situation of Canada's in. I mean, Canada may be one of the greatest countries in the world, but all Canadians across Canada has to realize we have to look after our own country ourselves. We can't be steady relying on other people. With the Elbows Up Canada, I did a podcast similar to this. I can't say all Nova Scotians were happy with my decisions I chose to make, but I stand by my decision. And why was that? What did I say? I told all Nova Scotians, I'm joining Team Canada to join this Elbows Up event, but I'm not joining Team Nova Scotia. Why is that? Because Nova Scotians all across Nova Scotia have been electing very, very problematic people, people who should not have been elected in the first place. And the political parties around Nova Scotia had not been addressing issues that mattered to Nova Scotia. Did you not notice that? Nova Scotians electing political parties who are not addressing issues that matter to them. That's what I've been seeing. Affordable housing, that Nova Scotia government, no matter what party was in power, was struggling, taking forever to finally get up. We got to combat affordable housing. Where's the Department of Community Services at? I noticed that. That's been happening far too long, and that has to be addressed. The federal government of Canada has to crack down on the province of Nova Scotia. It's either you do your job or we're going to do it for you, and we're going to send you the bill. That should be the attitude of the federal government of Canada. And I mean, like in the past, I, you know, like I said, look, this is what I want to see happen. There's a bill what I want to see happen. So all you candidates for the Central Nova riding, I'm gonna flat out bring this up. I want to see a bill passed. A bill saying, actually, I was behind Bill C-22. What was it? The Mental Health Act or something like that it was called. Daryl Sampson told me what it was because he called me, excited and all this stuff because they brought a lot of stuff that made a lot of sense. And I said, Daryl Sampson, you know what needs to happen? I said, there needs to be a law in place that no courts at any level, federal, provincial, should not be allowed to send any person to prison who is mentally ill. If a person's illness is into effect that led to their charges for whatever reason, the courts should not be allowed to send that individual or those individuals to prison. I said it's unconstitutional, it's criminal, it's sickening, it's bothersome that the judge, the prosecution, even their lawyers would allow that to happen or would even suggest it. What's even more bothersome is that the courts never addressed this to the provincial or federal government. I mean, there should be a law on this, and it should be. So if you have a law in effect that bans the courts from sending mentally ill people to prison, now you're saying, so what do we do with them? What do we do with these people if we can't send them to prison? Well, the answer to that's pretty simple. You got the East Coast Forensic Hospital in Dartmouth. You got a mental hospital in Truro, I believe. And you have the Abbey Lane building in Halifax. Why don't the province of Nova Scotia and the federal government of Canada expand these facilities? And that's where we put those people. You go in the mental hospitals, these people who committed crimes because of their illness, we put them into these mental institutions. They don't come out until they can manage their risk levels. They're educated on their illnesses. They're educated on what led their charges to become, for them to be charged in the first place. And they have to be capable of managing their risk levels. And once that's achieved, they go back out in the community. Now, the concern is with that is, some people mention to me is, well, Adam, here's the problem. You send them to these mental hospitals, they're back out in the community within a couple months or whatever. I said, no, this is what has to happen. Let's make an example. Let's say Sean Fraser. Sean, can I use you for an example? Oh, yeah. Let's say we'll use you for an example. Let's say you and I got into a scuffle. I punched Sean Fraser. I don't know, say I punched him in the arm. Hurt his arm right here, his shoulder hurt it. Let's say I hurt it. Instead of me going to jail, say 2 years, instead of me going 2 years in jail, they get 2 years in the mental hospital and they don't come out until their time is expired. They learned their illnesses, what led them to the charge. They learn how to manage their risk levels. And they are more understanding of their illnesses, what they have. What's wrong with the current mental health system with the courts is once they're received that NCR verdict for not criminal responsibility for the charges that they for because of their mental illnesses, what's wrong with the system is once they're in the system within 2, maybe 3 years, there's no criminal record because that's the way the system is. They wait for their criminal charge, all right. but they can be back out in the community within 3 years. So if somebody committed a serious offense, they're back out in the community within 3 years. So that's why I say, instead of doing, like I said with Sean Fraser, when I said let's punch him, I say I punch him in the shoulder, hurt his shoulder. Instead of me getting 2 years in jail, you get 2 years in a mental institution. So basically, let's say somebody receives 15 years in prison for whatever. They're found not criminally responsible because of their mental illness. All right. Instead of doing 15 years in prison, they do 15 years in the mental institution. Pretty simple. And what's wrong with it is the federal government, the provincial governments are not committed on how to better combat these situations. When you go to the East Coast Forensic Hospital in Burnside, see, I don't know why they call Burnside a part of Dartmouth when Burnside is a separate community from Dartmouth. That's a real thing that I questioned about that. And I said, if the federal government, these member of parliaments, these MLAs at the provincial level and the federal government was to get more engaged with these institutions, things would get a lot better. It really is. And you know why people fall through the cracks? Because the courts are not held accountable. Look at their lawyers, their legal representation. They're given Nova Scotia legal aid. They're so poorly funded they can't even properly represent their clients properly. And I've been saying this, and I'll say it again. If Nova Scotia legal aid is so poorly underfunded to the point they can't represent their clients properly, they shouldn't be assigned to these people. Why are they there if you can't do your jobs right? What has to happen is this financial thing with the courts has to go. It should be equal because the criminal justice system is supposed to be equal for everybody. That's not equal. If somebody can't afford a lawyer and all they got is this legal aid crap, and if this legal aid lawyer can't do their jobs because they're underfunded, that's not equal. That's discrimination. No, you don't get no proper representation because you can't afford a lawyer. No, I don't see anything equal and great about that. I find that's mighty insulting and vulgar to know that that's currently happening in our courts. So in closing, I'm going to say is I'm very concerned with the size of this riding. Pictou County, Truro, New Glasgow, all the way down the Porters Lake, Lake Echo, Muscatine Harbor, Tangier, Lake Charlotte, you name it. And like I said, the ultimate question, is there going to be a second constituency office? I hope so. And if there is, it should be between Muscatine Harbor and Porters Lake in that slot in between. And like I said, in that central overriding, public transit should be seriously looked at for the communities of New Glasgow, the town of Truro, including better funding their shuttle services to travel with the Moscow Rider that goes from Sheet Harbor along the number 7 highway right into Porters Lake and Lake Echo. And well, they go through Dartmouth and Halifax too. Here's a bothersome thing I'm going to mention after the Moscow Rider. I know Moscow Rider. No, I bet you the manager said, I hate to send a customer a bill like that. There was a client that had epilepsy. He lived in Sheet Harbor. He was about late 60s. He used to do hard labor, no painting and construction work at the Halifax Metro Center, now the Scotiabank Center. He lived in Sheet Harbor. There was days he had to call the Moscow Rider to drive him to the Porters Lake Park and Ride on Inspiration Way in Porters Lake, Nova Scotia to access the bus. He got a bill for $150 for one way from Sheet Harbor to Porters Lake. So he couldn't afford that no more. Neither could I. So do you know what happened when he couldn't afford the shuttle service anymore? He hitchhiked from Sheet Harbor to Porters Lake to the Park and Ride, and then he would get on that rapid service that would go from the Porters Lake Park and Ride right to downtown Halifax at Scotia Square on Duke Street. No person should be hitchhiking in the 21st century. And now you're going to say, all right, so why was he hitchhiking even though he couldn't afford that massive bill for that shuttle service? I want to tell you so. I know the answer to it. He said, Adam, do you know why I'm hitchhiking? I said, I have a license And he said, I'm scared to drive because I have epilepsy. He was actually protecting the community by not driving because of his illness, epilepsy. I have epilepsy. I know when a seizure is going to take place. Not everybody has that capabilities. And technically, epilepsy is a mental illness because the province and the federal government are so bloody ignorant. They fail to what's the best word to describe it, to have a full understanding how epilepsy works. With me, there's a personality disorder. That's from epilepsy. A lot of people think with epilepsy, you just fall down, take a seizure, and now you're good to go. No, there's a lot more to epilepsy than taking a seizure. You may outgrow the seizures, but the side effects can and will last on until the day you die. You can beat it, but the only way of beating epilepsy is by outgrowing it. You can have a seizure, your one and only seizure at the age of 12. Let's say a person at the age of 12 had a seizure, never had a seizure since until they turned 60. Suddenly they had one. That's what epilepsy can do to people. It can hide as if it's not there, then suddenly they have a seizure. That's what epilepsy is like. Maybe it's a personality disorder, but the criminal justice system doesn't consider that a mental illness. What is it then? It's a mental illness from the disability of epilepsy. That's how stunned the criminal justice system really is. I know when I'm getting pissed off. I know when I'm 2 seconds from decking this aerosol off the side. I know that. We all know that. But when that ticker in your head don't work, you got a problem here. We all came close of decking people when they're really getting on our nerves. We all been there, you know. I can't say it's the best thing in the world, but the truth of the fact is, having the capability of knowing when to walk away is the ultimate tool to combat that. I did that many times, even though it came close. But we all been in that situation. But anyways, my name's Adam Conrod, so I'm gonna say is my candidate that I'm looking at so far is Sean Fraser. I'm not going to get involved in this federal election because I'm concerned about the district boundaries. I'm not going to travel all the way from Forsyth all the way down to Pictou County and all this craziness to put out signs. It's not going to happen. But I am going to keep the Liberal Party in mind. I'll stand by what I said before with Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party. I'm concerned with him. I feel his arrogance could insult Canadians, steer them in a direction that he doesn't mean to be. I've seen people like that millions of times. They mean well, but they'll easily insult somebody and find themselves on the receiving end of a response that they may not feel comfortable with. That happens when you're an arrogant person, because what happens is when you're an arrogant person who's always arrogant, they suddenly fail to understand their actions around others, that they're creating people to feel uncomfortable around them. And then finally, when people have enough, they lash out at them for whatever means they may do it. Me, I may just tell the person what to go do it themselves and I'll leave. That's me. But not everybody's intelligent like that. You know, not everybody's has common sense like that. So that's why I'm mentioning this. But when, in closing here, I'm going to say when Daryl Sampson's my member of parliament, I stopped voting for him. Even though I was a Liberal, I stopped voting for him because when Daryl Sampson was a teacher at Eastern Shore District High, he had serious allegations against him. These victims, I talked to the RCMP, did not go before the RCMP, and the RCMP told me, unfortunately, the victims have to go forward for them to accept the complaint. What was those complaints? When Daryl Sampson was a teacher at Eastern Shore District High, this is really bothersome. What I'm about to tell you is bothersome. Fortunately, this is an allegation that is very strong, mind you, in the community. And I find it mighty concerning when Daryl Sampson decided to not reoffer his name after these allegations had come to light. I mentioned Daryl Sampson many times when he was a member of parliament. I remember calling and said, Daryl, I don't care if you like it or not. I said, it's either a yes or no question. Is this true? Yes or no? And I said, if it is, and I told Daryl, unfortunately, I'm asking you to resign commission as member of parliament for the riding of Sackville, Preston, Chezzentcook, effective immediately. He didn't want to do that. But I believe because of this situation, Ottawa has to do a much stronger screening process for their candidates, so they can assure Canadians they're not putting the wrong people to be running for office. Now, I'm not saying these allegations are true, but I am telling you that it's an allegation is very strong. There's people saying, "Yeah, I remember that. I remember that." Those students now are out in the community actually identifying Daryl Sampson, and that's my concern. And that's why I wasn't voting Liberal all those years after 2015, because I wasn't backing somebody with a serious allegation like that, because I'm there saying, I want insurance that if I vote Liberal, is that candidate safe and fit to be holding the seat as Member of Parliament? But it is what it is. So I'm encouraging former students that once had Mr. Sampson as your teacher. If these allegations are true, I'm asking you to do the right thing. Go before the police. Because here's the thing, you're helping not only yourself, but you're helping other people who became a victim of this person. You can help them out, get them help. And know what the great tool about this is when this happens? You put the son of a bitch in jail where he belongs, and that's the best feeling in the world, knowing that you brought somebody like that down. And like I said, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm bothered by it. And I wasn't going to let that go until Daryl Sampson's gone. So obviously he decided not to reoffer. I'm happy with that. But I'm not happy that there's victims out there that are still that they still have angerman issues because of it. So no, it is what it is. So in closing, my name's Adam Conrod, and we'll see who wins this 2025 federal election.